Hi, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. We're just kind of filtering in from the Zoom waiting room right now, so we're going to give it a moment to make sure everybody gets on the meeting before we actually start the presentation. Um, if you are new here, this is part of the ongoing Healey and AMG Center's community Q&A webinars. They started out as weekly webinars about the platform trial, and now they've morphed into twice a month webinars about a lot of different topics. And the topic this week is going to be research access in general. So we'll touch a little bit on the platform trial, but not limited to just that trial discussion today. And I think most of the people who are in the waiting room are on the line now, so we can go ahead and move to the next slide. And again, this is part of the webinar series offered by the Healey AMG Center. So we are based in Boston, Massachusetts, but have a lot of connections to different organizations in ALS, whether throughout the United States, but also some connections internationally as well. So a lot of people that we're in touch with and trying to share information. And so if we head to the next slide. Today's presentation is going to, as I said, kind of focus on research access. And so I'm here with my co-host, Judi Carey, and Judi is the research access nurse at Mass General's Healey Center. I'm the patient navigator for the platform trial at the Healey Center. And both of our roles really center around patient advocacy and providing educational resources and informational materials to help people make informed decisions about whether research is the right path for them. And if they are interested in research, how to take those first few steps toward getting involved. So Judi, I don't know if you want to say a bit more about your role, because we do wear different hats.
Yes, thank you so much, Catherine. It's great to be here with you. I guess, like Catherine said, we do a lot of the same tasks as far as sharing helpful information about trials. Catherine focuses on the platform. I focus on the trials that are at Mass General, but may also be enrolling elsewhere. So when I'm talking to people in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, I'm always going to share other centers that the same trial may be enrolling at. I also help with pre-screenings for the trials here at Mass General, as well as advocating for people to get into trials, figuring out systems for the best way to enroll folks in our trials here at Mass General. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Judi, and big thank you to Judi for being here. I've been looping Judi into a lot of presentations lately, so I'm sure she's sick of me, but a lot of information to share. And I want to start out the presentation today just by acknowledging that July 2025 marks the 5-year anniversary of launching the platform trial. So the Healey ALS Platform Trial is the first of its kind trial in ALS. There are different disease areas that had done platform trials. And basically a platform trial is the goal of it is to test drugs more rapidly and efficiently so that you can find answers to more investigational products in a faster time frame. And it's pretty gratifying to see that, over the course of 5 years, we've found the answers to 7 different study drugs, where previously different, if you're testing just one drug at a time using separate trial infrastructures, it can take a couple years just to test one drug. And so just a huge thank you to everyone who's been helping to keep this engine moving forward, whether you are somebody who participated in research, whether you are a data manager or a coordinator. It's taken a lot of buy-in from the community to make this happen, to keep it going for 5 years. And we have recently published a paper about the operational development and launch of the first 4 regimens of the platform trial. So that gives you kind of a sense of timeline for academic return of information, where those first 3 regimens started enrolling in July of 2020, and the articles about those first 4 was published May of 2025. So you had to stick around to see these, but I'm glad that I'm here to see this end result. And if you go to the next slide, I want to give even louder thank you to members of our advisory committees. So I think one of the things that the platform trial and a lot of other trials have adopted this model as well, is getting input from the people that you're trying to serve and the community members who you're going to be partnering with in research. And so from the get-go, even before I came on the scene in September 2020, we were getting input from caregivers, people living with ALS, people with lived experience, to get their input on trial design, study protocols, input when you're creating educational resources or recruitment strategies. And so in that paper that we published, we gave, I highlighted it here, a very sincere expression of our gratitude to all members of our committees, past and present, especially patient advisors. And one of our patient advisors had said, Sandy Morris, some of you might be familiar with, had said nothing about us without us. And that holds true in 2025, just as much as it did in 2020. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for a suggestion that Sandy made to introduce a patient navigator to clinical trials for ALS. So I will just say that table 3 in that paper, a lot of things outlined in that table involved feedback and suggestions from advisors. So I occasionally come up with some of my own ideas, but a lot of the times it's just incorporating feedback from the community, and moving suggestions up the ladder to leadership. So again, huge thank you to those committee members who basically shaped the trial into what it is. And then on the next slide, we can get into the meat and potatoes of why we're here. So research access, there's a lot of resources out there. And so Judi and I are going to just talk about some of the ones that we've collected over the years. I share a lot of these links via email. I myself tend to use the Mass General website the most. But clinicaltrials.gov is also a great place to find information about trials. I mostly use clinicaltrials.gov as a way of figuring out where that trial is being offered. So there's usually a list of which research centers are offering it, the contact information for those research centers, as well as, the exact eligibility criteria for who's included in the study versus who would not be included in it. So clinical trials is great for that. It's not necessarily the most patient-friendly or user-friendly interface. So I also really like using the ALS TDI trial navigator. You can create a custom profile for yourself, save it for later. You can go into the settings and filter search options by what phase of research you're looking for, or if there's certain criteria that you're looking for a trial, save that and come back to it, check if there's new opportunities. So in terms of the user experience, I really like that ALS TDI trial navigator, but there's lots of others on there. ALS Signal has a similar, different than clinicaltrials.gov, little more ability to tailor stuff there. So any of the links on the slide are a good way on your own time to look through clinical trial opportunities. And if you do like talking to an actual human, so the NAILS Northeast ALS Consortium Clinical Trial Liaison is available via phone and email as well. We can head to the next slide. Another resource that I really like, just kind of taking a step back before you even start looking at different trials that are available in the ALS space, figuring out what are those categories of trials and how do you even decide if you want to participate in a trial or maybe you want to just do vitamins or supplements instead. And so the Les Turner ALS Foundation actually has a guide on their website that I think Judi helped provide input on creating this guide. So they have it both in English and in Spanish, and it just kind of goes through what you need to know about research when you're making a decision about whether you want to be involved. And so that's a resource that I really like, even before you start looking at different trials. Then the next slide is another website that I love. So Your ALS Guide, I cannot say enough good things about. It is probably one of the most extensive sources of information online about any question that I can think of related to ALS. They have so many pages about pretty much every topic under the sun, whether it's at-home modifications or, ways to help with mobility, different augmentative communication guides. They have everything that I can think of on there, but they also recently added a web page about various types of research in ALS. So their website goes into detail about the different types of clinical trials there are. They include information about expanded access, off-labels, observational studies, tissue donation, which that last one is something that I don't typically see a lot of information easily accessible online. So again, just a really great resource for detailed information. And then the next slide, I wanted to mention too that for anyone on this call, if you are a veteran or if you know somebody affected by ALS who has ties to veterans, there is now a dedicated web page on the VA website with information for people living with ALS. So whether there's questions about VA clinical care for ALS or just looking for educational videos. And they also have links to research information on that website as well. And then I put a picture there of the interactive map. So that's a really great resource if people have VA specific questions regarding ALS. Next slide. And this is where I'm going to hand it over to Judi to take the wheel for the next few slides here. So Judi, I'll let you go into some added considerations.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. So before I even talk a little bit about what to expect in the enrollment process, I'm just going to back up to added considerations. I get a lot of questions about where do I start? Where do I even look for trials? So Catherine shared all of the same resources that I share with patients when I'm having research talks. And I think some of the things, just like key phrases that I share with people when you're starting to look for trials, you have to advocate for yourself. So what does that mean? It means maybe you, when you're looking for research, maybe you have a friend or a family member engage in this process with you or for you. You have to be a little bit of a sleuth too. So you might find the trials. I think they all originate from clinicaltrials.gov, and then they're packaged differently on all of the various websites that carry the trials, like ALS TDI Trial Navigator. So when I say you have to be a bit of a sleuth, sometimes all the information that they include is the city, state, and zip code, and they might not include the name of the center. So you have to do like a Google search to determine what might be the ALS Research Center that they're referring to. Then you can go on every center for the most part, all of these big research centers. They have their own web pages. We do, but we're not the only ones that have a big web page that has all our trials listed. A lot of the centers have their trials listed, so you can then go to their web page to see if you can find contact information if it's not listed on clinicaltrials.gov or ALS TDI Trial Navigator. Sometimes it is, sometimes there's a phone number or an email. You're welcome to use both. Oftentimes the pharmaceutical contact information is listed on clinicaltrials.gov. It's there. You can reach out to them to ask if maybe a center is going to be enrolling in a trial that's closer to your home. So you have to be, like I said, you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to be a bit of a sleuth when you're trying to find trials and contact information. Then when we talk about the enrollment process, you do not have to be always a patient at the clinic where a study is being offered. That is the case for our center, and I think it's the case for many of the research centers. Sometimes they do want to see you clinically. Always they're going to want certain medical records, and they will tell you what medical records they will want, but they're all related to the diagnosis of ALS. If you don't have research at your center, but you're really interested in research, it's always a good idea to ask your doctor if they don't do research. Do they know a center nearby that does do research for ALS that they could put you in touch with? That's a good way, one good way to try to find a research center. And then there's a couple of links here that provide you with finding ALS specialists or research centers that might be close to you. Sometimes patients like to, if they have a local clinic that just takes care of them clinically, but they still want to have that research component in their care. So they share their care with a larger research center, and they go back and forth. And so they're connected to research and really have information that is shared with them from the team about what's happening in research. Then when we want to think about our friends who want to get involved in research when they're living internationally. So they're living in another country from where the trials are offered. There's a lot more to think about. There really is. Catherine and I have both had over the years had many conversations with people living internationally who want to come here, for instance, and do trials. These are some great resources that Catherine has listed. for you to start, maybe start closer to home, internationally speaking. When you think about coming to the US or going to another country to do a trial, you have to think about a lot of things, such as the lodging, the travel, food. In most cases, it is not covered by the trial. Okay, so those might be out-of-pocket expenses for you. So that's something you have to think about. You also have to think about the physical burden of traveling. If you're traveling 10 hours by plane to go to it to go to visits at a research center, how many visits, how many times do you have to go in person? How often are those visits? So those are all things that you want to ask the study team. There is no dumb question in ALS research, that's for sure. So ask any question to the trial team so that you get all the information so you can make the best decision for yourself. The other thing is you can be away from your family and friends for extended periods of time. So you want to think about that. And then the other thing is that if something were to go on clinically while you're in another country doing a trial, those expenses, by that I mean if you had to get like a piece of medical equipment or something were to happen clinically to you that you didn't expect, that's not going to be covered by the trial either. So just those are things to think about. We do have participants who come from other countries to participate. They overcome all that and they do participate because it's worth it to them. But there are many more things to think about. Next slide, please. So here's what I'm calling, what did I call us? I called us the East Coast Communicators Contingency. I thought of that right before we started this webinar, Catherine. So we grew from, I was a lone wolf, and then Catherine and Allison Boulette came into this communications world, and now we have all these women that are also involved in communicating, being the bridge between the research centers and the patients in different capacities. They might be focused, like Catherine, on the platform trial, or the two Emmas focused on the All ALS trial. Christine is at Neil's, so she talks to people. She can send out a list of trials to people who reach out to her. Michelle and I are nurses here at the Healey Center. We both talk about research trials. Have general research talks with anybody who reaches out to us. So this is what I'm calling your East Coast Communicators Contingency. And yesterday we were on a call, I think 2 days ago, and I'm learning about all these wonderful people who are on the West Coast communicating about the All ALS study. There's a patient navigator at Barrows. There's a new person over at University of Colorado, another patient navigator there. So this is a group that's really growing, and we're here to help, again, bridge the gap between patients and the research centers. So use us. Next slide. So Catherine also included some of the multi-center research trials and studies that are going on. And I think some of these connect to our website, probably the Healey ALS Platform Trial and the MyMatch. And then the others, I think, go to clinicaltrials.gov. So when you're thinking about research, there really is something that everybody can participate in. It might not always be a drug trial because there's more criteria, but there's always observational studies, and we really need people to participate in those. And these are scattered across the country. Some are worldwide. Some of these studies, like Novartis, Amylyx, those are also offered in other countries. The rest of them, I believe, the rest of the observational studies in the Healey platform and the MyMatch are all here in the US. Platform trial got up to as many as 75 centers, which is amazing. Started with 50 or 51. So that gives everybody many more opportunities to jump in and get involved. And then the MyMatch is a lot smaller right now with 4 centers in the US, but hoping to grow over time. The trials from MyMatch are heavy into the biomarkers. And the hope is that if anything positive comes out of those, that those either could be, if it makes sense, go into the HEALEY Platform Trial as a 2-3 or go to a standalone trial. So that's that slide. And I think I have one more slide if you go to the next one. Another thing that, along with all the communications that I've seen grow, this is also another area that I've seen growth, and that's the webinars that happen. Niels has some great webinars, Les Turner, Everything ALS, All ALS, the Healey Q&As on Thursdays. Some of them are dedicated to EAPs, others are dedicated to just general information like tonight or the platform trial. And most of them, would you say, Catherine, they all keep the recordings online, would you say? It's worth
I think,
checking.
yeah, I think for all these organizations, they do post the recordings online afterward.
So I think it's picking your favorites now. Before it was like a desert, and now you have so many opportunities with so many different resources and webinars that you really have to kind of pick and choose your favorites. And I
I was
think
just at a Liz Turner webinar earlier today. They had one about voice banking, so I tuned into that one.
yeah,
So yeah, I even attend. I'm not, yeah.
good.
I'm not loyal to just these webinars. I like getting info from other people too.
Awesome. And I think I hand it back to you at this point, Catherine, to
I
finish
think
it
the
up.
last slide here is just to share for our webinars, the Healey and AMG webinar series, um, upcoming in August. For the second Thursday in August, we have Dr. Bjorn Oscarson from the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, is going to come talk about updates regarding the Budalast EAP. So that's an expanded access protocol. So that will be the discussion on August 14th. And then August 28th, we will have Dr. James Berry and a lead biostatistician, Eric Macklin, come talk about what we've learned from the platform trial biomarker. So there will be a little bit of discussion about home spirometry, as well as, just in general, the thousands of data points that the platform trial has gathered and what we've gleaned from that. If you want email notifications about the different topics for these webinars, you can sign up for the ALS link. That's an email broadcast system. We don't inundate people. There's maybe like 3 emails a week max that go out through this link. So it's, information about these webinars, but also information about various studies or updates, press releases, and ALS research sent out through MGH's Healey Center. And then the link to register for more of these webinars is also on this slide. And with that, I think we can take the slides down, open it up to questions. I know I wanted to start, Judi. I got a question via email before this webinar, and I do see that person in the audience. So I had sent off a quick email in response, but I wanted to get your thoughts, Judi. So somebody emailed us asking, he has a daughter who is 33, newly diagnosed with ALS, and they're just kind of in the early stages of where do we begin? What resources should they have on hand to kind of get the ball rolling, seeing as I'm not sure exactly how recent, but it seems like just like that first step toward learning about research.
So I guess I would start with my daughter's clinic to see if they are involved in research, because it's always easier to travel closer to home. So I would start with my own clinic. If they don't do research, do they know of centers that are in the surrounding area that get involved in research? There was one of the links that Catherine had shared was finding centers for Niels. I think that was a good one. So you could look there because, like I said when I was talking earlier, we never mind sharing patients if that's helpful to people living with ALS. But so by that, it's like you can have your local clinic and then connect to a center that offers clinic, but also does research. So you're getting all of the pillars of care, because I think knowledge of research has become a pillar of care over the last 5 years, I would say. So, at your center or nearby, they might have somebody who talks about trials, goes in and talks with the patients. Myself and Michelle Redens, we do have general research talks with people near and far. So you just send an email. I think Catherine shared our email address too. I feel like sometimes we can share a lot of resources in a one-on-one in a Zoom situation like this, but just with you and your daughter, and kind of help share resources that will get you on your pathway to learning more about research. It is a good time now, like, to start learning. You are correct. Learn now, early, and see what's out there.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Judy. Yeah, I agree with that. I think we talked a little bit earlier. You don't have to be a patient at a center that offers research, but it does kind of take the load off of your shoulders for finding that information. Like, people, I think, tend to have to do a little bit more digging if their provider isn't somebody who, is in, Judy's literally situated with, I think, 30 research coordinators sitting on her right-hand side in the office. So there's just an ease of flow of information if you're connected with a ALS clinic that does know about researchers involved in research. Um, but again, you can always email us to ask as well. And then there is a question here. Somebody says a lot of clinical trials for ALS seem to require that participants are within 24 months of symptom onset. What do you recommend for people who are not eligible based on that criteria?
Yeah, no, I feel like that's been a change that I've seen over the last with I've done this for over 8 years, and I do feel like they've done that not to be unkind, but because it's just for the data. I guess the longer somebody has had ALS, it might affect the data about the effectiveness of the study drug. So if you fall into that category of above 25 months, so month 25 and above, there sometimes are trials. I know of one. It's only a phase one. It's Progenics. It's enrolling at just a few sites. They do not have a cutoff for disease duration, or symptom onset. So they are out there. You just have to stay in touch with the study teams. You can even do a search, I think, maybe on ALS TDI Trial Navigator. I bet you can put in certain criteria. Catherine's doing it right now, but I think you might be able to find trials that way. Um, Talk to your clinical team if they're engaged in research. Um, you can always, I know this isn't maybe what the answer you were looking for, but you can always do observational research. I make it sound like it's a one-off, but it's so important to what everybody's trying to get to for answers. So you can always get involved if you haven't already in some of the observational biomarker research too.
I'll say, I think, Judy, you touched on this, that a lot of times people are emailing us or calling because they're asking about drug trials, so interventional studies for ALS. And those are the ones where most drug trials in ALS do have fairly strict criteria about participation. And it's just, they're trying to find the answers as quickly as they can in the population that they're enrolling. But for people who are beyond that cutoff, the options might be, rather than placebo-controlled drug trial, you can talk to your doctor about off-labels or supplements. There's a website called ALS Untangled that Dr. Bedlack helps oversee, and so that can help guide that conversation with your clinician if you wanted to go down that route. There are expanded access protocols, which tend to have broader criteria for people who do not qualify for clinical trials in ALS. They are kind of few and far between, and you do have to be a patient of the provider at the center where an expanded access protocol is offered. So it's not quite the same dynamic as reaching out to a center to get involved in a study.
Yeah.
It is more like an extension of clinical care if your center happens to have those. But if you're somewhere where there are EAPs, you can talk to a provider about that. And that
Always,
could be an option.
always talk to your provider. That's right, Catherine, too, because they might have other ideas as well. Because with the EAPs, often the vital capacity has to be at a lower number. Like oftentimes you'll see below 50. Not all, that's what I've seen, but always talk to your provider if there's other opportunities that they might be aware of.
Great. And then Judy, I don't know if you know the answer to this question. I do not, but somebody's asking, do you know of any webinars on the details of adjusting the settings on NIV devices that are guided by research?
No, but I don't mind looking into that. I saw that question. I was like, oh, let me look and see if I see, like I was gonna look on Neil's to see if they have done any webinars recently on respirate, NIV and things like that. Um, I assume you've talked to your own respiration RTs at your center. They might have some information or papers. That's a good place to start. But I can certainly ask around here. Because not only do I have coordinators at my fingertips, but I can ask some of the specialists here too to see if they have any information to share.
That's a good point, and worth mentioning that when you email us, I am sometimes going behind the scenes trying to figure out information that I didn't have previously. So a lot of the resources we've gathered have just been because we're going down that rabbit hole, so you don't have to. So if there's a rabbit hole worth going down, we can do some of the legwork there. Um, and then somebody mentions Healing ALS offers a lot of information for people with ALS. Do you recommend their website? I'm not familiar. Judy, have
I
you
was
heard of
just
it?
gonna, no, I have not heard of that. Healing ALS.
Mhm.
Have to check it out.
I know,
I have
I was
not.
just saying, I'll be looking that up. I will note that Dr. Bedlack fairly recently, I think it was through Neil, so the Northeast ALS Consortium, they have educational webinars. I think he was speaking at one of their webinars. Um, and there's a lot of information out there online about ALS or different interventions. And Dr. Bedlack has kind of a list of red flags to look for that will kind of tip you off of maybe this isn't such a trustworthy source. Um, and so that's a good model to use if we find that webinar link. That if there's, if there aren't any red flags that come up, um, that there's a decent chance they're actually just trying to do good without taking advantage of people looking for information. But yeah, I don't think we've heard of that particular website.
He actually mentioned it when he was on your webinar too, about what, kind of things to watch for too.
Mhm. Because
So,
unfortunately, yes, unfortunately, there are, people are, we had to disable YouTube comments on these webinar recordings actually, because there'd always be somebody fishing in the comment section on YouTube. So you do have to be wary. And again, that's where Judi and I are here at the Healey Center, kind of helping to filter out what are reliable resources that we feel like we can trust sending this information to people looking for guidance. And so if you're just like trying to figure out where to go for information, we can help provide those resources as well. And with that, I think we got all of the questions that were submitted in the chat. But again, you can find us via email, over phone, um, or if you're coming in for a clinic visit at Boston at the Healey Center, you could track down Judi in person.
yep.
But thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. We'll post the recording on our website. If you want to come in August, we got a couple webinars in August. And Judi, I'll let you close us out with some final words.
Oh, wow. Thanks. It was great to be here. Thanks for having me. And thanks for asking all your great questions out there. Anytime we can be of help, just please reach out.
I lied, I actually thought of two things. So there are a couple of private organizations that I've been linking to a lot. So one person I was just emailing today, regarding that question of someone whose daughter is 33 living with ALS. I mentioned this organization called Her ALS Story. And so that's a really great group that just members of the ALS community came together for, women who are diagnosed with ALS before the age of 35. It's a really great emotional support. They provide advice and tips for each other, and just kind of help share that experience so that you don't feel maybe like the only one going through that. There's a whole, group of women who um, are still living with ALS and posting great Instagram stories and inspiration and advice on different ways to live fully. And then there's also one of my other favorite organizations is called End the Legacy. And so that is an organization. They have a website with information for people who have genetic ALS or frontotemporal um, FTD symptoms. So that website is another one that I really like for people who have kind of questions about support for families affected by genetic ALS. And so I wanted to mention those two groups as well. But with that, I'm done talking, I think. There might have been something that came in the chat here.
There
Uh,
is. You want to share the
yes,
last for
so
the
somebody, and this is what I'm talking about. I'll share good information wherever it comes from. So somebody who is in the audience right now just said, FYI, last night, Everything ALS hosted a webinar on NIV or NIV, Breathing in ALS, Insights from a Clinical Research Program for Respiratory Care in ALS with Dr. Jason Akerbo, if I pronounced that right. So it should be posted on their website. So for the person who was asking about research-informed NIV care, there was a webinar offered through Everything ALS. So thank you for sharing that information, and hopefully that person's still on who asked that question. All right, with that, we're signing off for the night. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.